What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, just like we are each and every single week. But of course, as of last week, we are in our new time slot. It is 5:30 Eastern, which means 2:30 in the afternoon here on the West Coast where I reside. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, we've got another great guest this week. I'm looking forward to talking to this guy once again. But before we get into that, how you feeling, man?
I'm doing pretty good, John. Obviously excited, in comparison to last week because I was struggling a lot with the internet. I got things working. Of course, shortly thereafter we finished recording the episode, everything started working again. So I'm happy that I got everything back in normal. I'm not running around. I'm super excited to have this guest back on. For those of you that haven't been following us this entire time, this person has been with us before. We weren't able to record and post because we didn't have a channel at the time. Now we got him back. We get to talk about Mets stuff. We get to talk about everything that's gone on ever since. I'm super excited. Let's get into it.
Me too, and we got a lot of people in the comments already, and the one that I want to highlight is Patty in NYC saying, glad the show is at 5:30. Like I said, that should be our time moving forward because we want to keep the engagement up, and we know it's better if people are home from work than in the middle of their work day, and obviously not everybody working a traditional 9 to 5, but we think this time might be even better, so we'll see going forward. But yes, without further ado, I want to bring this guy in and talk all things Mets, also just catch up and see what's going on. He was a great guest about a year ago. I don't know exactly when it was, but it was in the offseason last year. The only number 48 we acknowledge over here in Metsland, and that is the one and only Glendon Rusch. Glendon, thanks for being back, man. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome, Glendon.
Good. It's great. It's great to have you back, man. Before we talk Mets stuff and baseball stuff and MLB and all that fun stuff, what have you been up to last year or so since we talked to you? Everything all good?
Yeah, everything's great. Appreciate you asking. Just running around being a dad. I've got a freshman in high school that started up and is playing, and now my oldest, believe it or not, is already a freshman in college. Wow. He's at Indiana University Southeast, and so I just spent the last few hours over there with those guys, with their team, and hanging out with the pitchers and being a therapist, being a coach. Yeah, all the things you do to help those guys out.
Well, awesome. How much of being a pitching coach, maybe not at that level, right? Because at the high school and college level, you're still doing a lot of instructing. Obviously, you played in the bigs, so you have a lot of tangible things about mechanics and grips and all that stuff. I'm sure you could teach them. But how much of being a pitching coach is just really being a therapist, I guess, is my question.
That's a lot. You wear I'll go off my experience from when I was with the Padres as a pitching coach in their system. You wear a lot of different hats as a coach in general. And it could be, it's a mentor, it's a coach, it's a father figure, it's a friend. Those guys need everything, especially younger players in high school and college, and then get into the professional ranks as well. Everyone thinks, oh, they're a pro, or, oh, they're a big leaguer. They don't have to deal with all this other stuff that the younger guys do. They deal with just as much. And so you really have to understand how to communicate with people. Everyone's different. You can get your message across to different people in different ways. And some people take it in differently and some people react differently. So it's cool. I really enjoy it. I love being around the guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like when you talk about it, not only just now, but last time when we had you on too, it's just something you're passionate about, and it's great to see. And obviously, people with big league experience always like going back and teaching at the high school level, at the college level, coaching at that level is always just like fantastic to me. I wish I had something like that and I didn't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's just awesome. It's awesome to see. And and again, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to talk to us.
So much.
You this past summer though, you did get to go back and be at Citi Field and be with the Mets and spend a little bit of time there. So what was that like?
Man, it was so much fun. I had such a good time being back there. I've gotten to go to Citi a couple times. I never went there as a player, but I love Citi Field. I love the atmosphere. I love Mets fans being back there, but being around all my teammates, and I mean, we had so many guys there just from the 2000 team, and it was awesome. I mean, my youngest son was out there. He's out there playing catch on the field with Turk Wendell. He's playing catch with Billy Wagner. He's he's 14 now, 15 years old. But I was telling him on the bus, I was like, how lucky you are to, like, you're playing catch with a Hall of Fame closer, one of the coolest relievers of all time. I mean, it was cool, and being around those guys always takes you right back to, even though it's been 20 plus years, you feel like, hey, I'm back in the clubhouse again with the guys, or I'm on the field. It comes back quick.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Jump into the comments real quick. We got Shay saying, "Hey, Glendon." There's been a lot of that. People in the comments just shouting you out, saying hello. And it's great. It's a little wrinkle that we've added since the last time you were a part of this, when we just did the audio podcast and we saw each other, but it wasn't for anybody else's consumption. But this is all live. We're doing our thing, and I appreciate Rael saying it, because we always forget to say it. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up if you
thumbs up.
Helps the algorithm and all that fun stuff. Glendon, it's funny because Ibby and I talk about this all the time with regards to the teams from 2000 and the early 2000s, that it was sort of the forgotten team for a while, because unfortunately in 2000 they made the World Series, but the Mets didn't win the World Series. And so it was always, hey, let's celebrate 86, which we should. Let's celebrate 69, which we should. But as we've gotten further away, I think people have grown an appreciation from bringing back the black uniforms to again, just celebrating guys like you and Turk and Piazza and Ventura, and the list goes on and on. Of course, Todd Zeal, Edgardo Alfonso. Is that something that you're just prideful in seeing, that, hey, this era of Mets baseball was meaningful too, especially for guys like me and Ibby, who, we were like your son's age. We were 13, 14, 15.
That's what we grew up on. Yeah.
That's the wheelhouse for us.
Yeah, for sure. I run into tons of people like you guys that were teenagers at the time or in high school. And that was, those teams were such a big part of what they watched, who they followed growing up, everything that went along with it. And it is cool because it's difficult. Of course, we all wanted to win that World Series, and it would have been historic to beat the Yankees as good as they were and everything at that time. But I still look back on it, and if you go back all the way through the history of baseball, it's a very, very small fraternity of us that got to compete at that level and make it to a World Series. Of course, you want to win it. But I do look back, and that team was so much fun. I learned a lot. I had a lot of great mentors and older guys on that team that kind of helped me through as a young player coming from Kansas City that was under the big bright lights for the first time. Those guys helped out a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned something that Ibby and I did a whole episode on the MLB Hall of Fame after it was announced. Of course, congratulations to Scott Rowland. And, Ibby and I take some issues with the way the Hall of Fame voting works in baseball, because we both had 10 people on our ballot. 10 is the maximum, and obviously some people are going to exclude the steroid guys, and that's fine if that's the way people go. But you mentioned Billy Wagner as a Hall of Fame closer. So, your thoughts on Wagner and not getting in, obviously getting closer. We both had Wagner as a Hall of Famer. I for my money, he's the best left-handed closer of all time. So
he's absolutely a Hall of Famer. I don't think some of those relievers get anywhere near the appreciation and the due that they're deserved in kind of the current game. And I think that he's such a cool story because I have a history with him going all the way back to the Midwest League in '94. He was a starter in Cedar Rapids that year, and I was in Rockford with the Royals. And I remember always reading the stat sheets, and you're like, man, who's this Billy Wagner guy? And I think he had 200 plus strikeouts in the Midwest League that year, A-ball. But I remember watching him come up and who he was, what he did. And then as you get to know him, I got to know him over the years, being across the way and competing against him. And such a great guy, loves baseball, loves to teach. And I look forward to the day he gets in. I remember I made a couple comments, which was probably not smart on Twitter to ever make comments on anything. But I remember seeing a couple of the early ballots and people saying, people making their ballots public, and you see one or two guys voted for it. I'm like, I look at that list and I go, there's 10 plus Hall of Famers on that ballot. There's no doubt in my mind. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's the last thing you can argue with anyone about, because everyone has their own opinion and but that's the way I look at it. I looked at that ballot. It's like Andrew Jones, Scott Rowland, and Billy Wagner, all these guys, and Todd Helton for me. I mean, I was teammates with Todd, man. He is as good as it gets and deserves to be in there, but it just takes time. I feel like they're always siphoning down the class to a small amount. It's like they get so close. We could have had 3 or 4 guys go in this year, right? Aside from the other what do you call it, the veterans ballot that goes in and everything, but easily could have been 4 or 5 guys that go in. But it's like by the time the vote comes around, there's one, so always small classes. But I get it. Look, it's the Hall of Fame. It's the best of the best of the best, but there's clearly guys on there that deserve to go in this year. Scott Rowland's a no-brainer. I mean, he was I played against him almost my whole career, and he was as good as it gets. Defensively, offensively, clutch, hard-nosed player, tough on the Mets, right? We faced him so much. Philly. And then I go to the Central, and he's in St. Louis.
He's in St. Louis,
Saw him a lot.
Yeah, it's funny because when Ibby and I did a deep dive on it, Ibby, I'll let you get your point in on Billy Wagner. You got a great one, but my point on Helton was, it almost seems like Helton gets victimized for spending his whole career in Colorado when other guys get championed for, how come these guys can't spend their whole career somewhere? How come it's not like the old days? It's like, well, he can't help where he was drafted. He decided to be loyal. He decided to stay. And people are like, well, what would his numbers be like if he didn't play in Coors Field? It's like, you shouldn't penalize him for it. That's absurd.
No, it never made any sense as to why a player is shot down just because Major League Baseball decided to erect a franchise in a certain spot. It's not the player's fault that it's in Colorado. You put a place there, and I've said multiple times, a majority of players in any sport would rather play at home than on the road. But even when you deep dive on Helton's road stats, he's still a damn good ball player. So I never understood why anyone would be against him. I have a couple of friends that listen to the show who are against Todd Helton, and so we've had our back and forth before. I know we've had our back and forth before, but when you look at him for like a decade span, the numbers he put up, in my opinion, because I'm a big fantasy baseball guy, I drafted Todd Helton a lot. So the numbers that he put up, it was like video game type numbers. He was an absolute machine at the plate. Hall of Famer, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, agreed. He's got my vote from day one, and great teammate. Love playing with him. Hard-nosed player. Look, there's not that many guys left that are going to be those type of generational players that will stay with a franchise. Like you brought up, like who's the next guy that's going to do that? Maybe Judge, right? Now that he re-signed back.
Yeah, right.
There's those are guys are going to be very, very rare moving forward because of the way free agency works and everything else.
And it's funny too, because, you even have the situation where, a guy will spend 99% of his career somewhere and then, the last year go and be somewhere else, or the last 2 years kind of kick around. And so, yeah, I think it's so absurd to penalize a guy like Helton for that. And, Ibby's point on Wagner was great. And after this, we'll put the Hall of Fame stuff to bed for a bit, but, he basically said, if not Wagner, then who? Right?
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the oversaturation argument of like, there's too many second basemen. There's too many this, there's too many that, because I think a guy should just be able to get in on merit alone. But it is true. If you're not going to let Wagner in, who's the next closer you're going to let in?
Like, I don't understand. Like, when a guy's that dominant, you're going to say, yeah, but he doesn't have the saves that Hoffman has. Yeah, he's not as dominant as what everyone thinks that, like, it's wrong when everyone thinks that any closer can be Mariano Rivera. That is literally one of one. So the fact that people are often comped to him, it's not fair. So when you look at Wagner's numbers and then you look down the line, you're like, well, you're not putting Eric Gagne in. You're not putting any of these other. K-Rod was on John's ballot as a vote. That's a potential, but still, like, if Billy Wagner cannot get in, I question moving forward, especially where the game is going in terms of relief pitchers and stuff like that. I don't know if we're like, when are you going to see another reliever go in? I don't think you will.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the fun things I do with my kids is when the ballots come out, whenever they're released, is I'll start walking them through some of these players because they didn't get to see most of these guys play.
Right.
And the 2 guys that stood out to me that are, borderline Hall of Fame players that have stats that blow you away. Number 1 for me is Mark Burley, and number 2 is Torrey Hunter.
Yeah.
And those were both guys of my generation. But I went back and looked up Mark Burley's numbers of how many years in a row he threw 200+ innings.
His consistency.
How many years? I don't know if he ever had a losing record. He might have had a 500 record at some point. I know nobody cares about wins anymore, but I do still. But his numbers were crazy. Like 15 years in a row, he went like 200+ innings, which is unheard of. And then Torrey Hunter, too, is, the defense and the kind of player he was. It's funny to see guys like that with numbers as good as they have. It's like they don't even hardly get a vote.
Yeah,
that's crazy because
shows you how hard it is.
There's so much. I feel like there's a lot of grandstanding too by these guys who post their ballots, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't vote for anybody," or "I only voted for one player." And you look at it, you're like, of all the players, you voted for this one player. And I brought up to John when we were talking about, I was like, you want to talk about great players? Carlos Delgado fell off the ballot like after one year. Carlos Delgado, like look at the numbers, man, and he falls off after a year. It's incredible to me. And also Jeff Kent, Hall of Famer. Enough said there, but that's a whole nother argument for another day.
Yeah, I think anytime you do something, Glendon, it's funny. You mentioned, you look at what a guy like Torrey Hunter was able to do in all facets of the game. But I also think sometimes being really great at one thing can also get you in. And when you look at a guy like Jeff Kent, I mean, he has more home runs than any second baseman in the history of Major League Baseball. That is a long time. To me, Hall of Famer. I'm sorry. I don't care if he was rude to people sometimes.
Who cares?
I agree with you guys. I agree with you guys. I'd rather see that little bit smaller percentage of guys in than out. Mm-hmm. What everyone considers their borderline Hall of Famers, which to me, those guys aren't borderline. I look at that. I look at Jeff Kent and I'm like, he's a Hall of Famer. But Dale Murphy, Hall of Famer.
Right. Yeah.
Finally, Fred McGriff got in this year. He's a Hall of Famer. So the more and more you see those type of guys, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I'm not a voter, and they'll never let me vote.
They'll never let you vote because your heart is in the right place. That's why.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll jump back into the comments real quick. Darren, all the way over in the UK, saying, "Let's go, guys!" Absolute
what's up,
scenes. Just checking in. UK Mets in the house. We have international reach here, Glendon, over until Mets do his part.
What's up, Darren?
Good stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about, and I don't expect you to, be completely, locked in the way we are as ravenous Mets fans, every single move and every single thing. But obviously the Mets were super active in the offseason. A lot of players came, a lot of players went. I'll pull up a list of the most notable moves. And look, obviously everybody's going to talk about the signing of Justin Verlander to replace the departure of Jacob deGrom. Glendon, I'll start with Jake for you. Were you shocked to see deGrom leave, or if you weren't, why weren't you?
My gut feeling told me that he would not be back. That was, and there was really no basis behind it other than I just felt that way. I felt like he was going to go elsewhere. No inside information, no behind the scenes stuff. That was just my gut feeling. So I wasn't really surprised that he left. I actually wasn't surprised at all where he went because I felt like with Chris Young being the GM there and then bringing on Bochy and doing what they're doing, I felt like that was a good new home for him. I don't know if there's anybody I've enjoyed watching pitch more than him. Especially, I always skew towards the lefties, right? I love the lefties, but man, watching him when he was healthy and on it's as special as it gets. And I got to chat with him at Old Timers Day, and I just had a blast just talking pitching and talking baseball with him. And Al Leiter was out there, trying to fix everyone's mechanics, and it was awesome. We had a good time. But no, I wasn't. That was my feeling early on. Verlander is as good as it gets, and really you look for, of course, health as the guys get older, but these guys are proven that they can go out and do it at any age and make their starts and go to the posts. And I mean, his year last year was unbelievable. So I think it's a great sign for the Mets. I love those two guys at the top of the rotation, man, because they just do nothing but compete and win. That's what they do. And every staff needs those guys, and they're lucky to have two of them.
Now, this is a bit of a loaded question, and it's probably an unfair question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because it's been a big topic of debate amongst Met fans, right? Like I joked at the top of the show saying, you're the only number 48 we acknowledge. And of course, I don't sincerely mean that. Jacob deGrom is a longstanding legacy. And I think a lot of Met fans have been unfair to the fact that he left and he made a decision.
It's a fresh wound.
That's what I think it's a fresh wound.
It's fresh.
But he made a lot of money to go do that. He wanted a different kind of life and setup for his family and his future. And I understand that. And I actually don't begrudge it. But there is a little bit of debate over whether you would rather have deGrom signed for the next 5 years or Verlander signed for the next 2. So just from a Mets perspective, leaving Texas out of it, do you think the Mets are better off with Verlander, or do you think they would have been better off with deGrom if the contracts were exactly what they were? Like, assuming the Mets would have had to give deGrom 5 years, 185.
Well, the only downside of Jacob over the last few years has been the ability to start and consistently. So, and he's battled through some stuff and he hasn't been healthy at times. So that's a big question mark. And if you're going to go out 5 years, you better have some return on investment there. Obviously Steve Cohen and the crew did their diligence with the signing. I think Verlander seems to be at a peak of what he's doing. So I think they made the best decision with what they had in front of them. I don't think they had any chance of Jacob coming back, regardless of necessarily what the deal was. So I think they went out and pursued what they thought was the best fit and a shorter term, value at that age, right? With Justin and coming off a World Series, and there's winners, right? You have proven winners, proven World Series winners at the top of your rotation. It doesn't get any better than that. The guy that I was sad to see leave, honestly, was Taijuan Walker. I really liked him. Bassett did a great job too. He was consistent, went out there and pitched and made all his starts, threw up a lot of innings, was very good. But I don't necessarily feel like Taijuan Walker has come into his own fully yet, which might be kind of weird to say because he's been around a little while.
Yeah.
But I could see him flourishing at some point and really putting it all together. But that, I look at everybody and kind of see track records and where everyone's been, and it might happen for him.
I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but is there, from a pitcher's perspective, is there something that you really love about what you saw from Taijuan Walker over the past couple of years with the Mets? I mean, he did have 2 unbelievable first halves. In the first year, it looked like, just the amount of injuries, not pitching full seasons. Of course, the COVID shortened year kind of caught up to him. And in the second half, he wasn't as good. But last year, it was a very good season for him from start to finish. But is there something that you saw where you're like, this guy, like, there's another gear, there's another level that he can get to?
Yeah, I think that's it, what you're saying. I think he continually is going, trending upwards. And if he puts together a full season of that, which that's always a big if, right? It's not easy to do. A lot of guys have one better half than the other. It's just the way baseball works sometimes. But who knows? It may all click for him. Unfortunately, we'll see it in the Philly uni, right? Than not the Mets uni.
Rael saying, I look forward to watching Pete hit against Taijuan. So,
I was just going to pull that one up.
Little bit of saltiness, but I guess that's fair. And then Carlos Ramos saying, hey, Glendon, we do have a spot open in the bullpen for a lefty. Just saying, if you wanted to come back and pop the uniform on. It's a little tougher to be a situational lefty nowadays because you got to be able to get out righties. You got to be able to go 3 batters minimum. It wasn't one of the rules I wanted to talk to you about, but how do you feel as somebody who spent, a bulk of your time as a starter, but also some time as a reliever? Do you like the 3 batter minimum rule, or do you think it's weird?
I'm not a big fan of that rule. I'm definitely not a big fan of the National League being abolished because that's my favorite style of baseball. I love, I know people don't love the pitcher hitting, but I love the strategy in the game in the National League the way it was. I miss that. As far as Carlos's question, I could give him an inning probably. It might take me a month to recover. It took me about 2 weeks to recover from fantasy camp this year, Mets fantasy camp, when I threw to all the guys down there. So But yeah, good
Oh
question.
man,
Can,
that's good
how
stuff.
I again, I know it's a loaded question, but how hard can you throw nowadays? Like if you go to fantasy camp, obviously
Oh,
you're not trying to get
amazing.
out Frank Thomas here. You're getting out guys like me and Ibby. So I'm sure you don't have to reach back and get your extra gear. But how hard do you throw nowadays?
I'm consistently about the 82, 83 mark for the
Okay.
so I
All
threw
right.
an inning for my son's college over at IUS. They did they do a World Series in the fall where they play 3 scrimmage games.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and the other pitching coach there decided we'd each throw an inning at the end of the last game. And they had the Rapsodo out there. And yeah, my tops was 83, but I was consistently about 82, which isn't bad for a 48-year-old man, right?
No, it's not
I
bad
was
at
gonna
all.
say, I was when John told me that we were getting you back on for an episode, I started doing some stuff and I was just like, man, we just missed out on a great opportunity. I didn't even say this to John yet. I was like, we got Glendon coming on for episode 87. It would have been great if we had him to come on for episode 88 as the man who once threw 88 in the major league. So I was upset about that, but the fact that you're still throwing in the 80s at your age, God bless you. That's awesome, man.
That'd have been beautiful. Yeah, man, I've been so lucky. I have no shoulder surgeries, no elbow surgeries, never had Tommy John. I've been really lucky. I can still play catch with my kids, go out there and occasionally get on the mound and show those youngsters what it's all about. But I had a pitching coach tell me my first year with the Royals in spring training, we had Mitch Williams in camp with us, and he actually made our team and came out, and he had one of the best lines ever about Mitch. And this goes for me now too. He goes, he's throwing it just as hard as he always did. It's just not getting there as quick.
That is fantastic. Well, Carlos has heard enough. He said, I'll take it. I'm emailing Buck and Steve Cohen right now. So
sounds good.
The other guy I want to bring up, and obviously, again, the Mets have made so many moves, but the one guy I want to focus on with you, and again, admittedly, you may not know a ton about him. A lot of Mets fans don't, except from things they saw on YouTube. But I know you're always in with the Pitching Ninja. I think you have the Pitching Ninja shirt on right now, as a matter of fact. Yes,
Love
I
the
thought
Pitching
so.
Ninja.
I thought I saw that.
Love
So
him.
I want to talk about Kodai Senga and what you know about him, or what you've seen about him, or what you like about him, if anything. And again, I'm putting you on the spot. So if you're like, listen, John, I don't know anything about him, that's totally fine too.
No, I actually don't know a lot about him other than I'll tell you this, the track record historically of Japanese pitchers that come over is they're extremely type A work ethic. Nobody outworks them. They command the ball very well, have an arsenal that's very tough to hit. So all the guys, if you go back, when you look at like Dice K and going back, Yu Darvish when he came over, all these Japanese pitchers that have come over, they're good, man. And he clearly is going to be he's going to go to the posts every 5 days, and he's going to be a great addition to the rotation, in my opinion. I'm looking forward to seeing him in spring training because I haven't really seen much live action of him throwing, so I kind of want to get the feel for what he looks like, and I can't wait.
And Carlos Ortiz saying he's a ghost, of course, talking about the ghost forkball. So, like, every once in a while,
seeing him hold that pitch, like, seems nuts.
Every once in a while, Glendon, there's somebody that comes out of Japan, it seems like specifically, where there's like a different name for a pitch. And like, obviously there's only so many ways physically to throw a ball and make the ball move. But, there was Dice K. I think it had the gyro ball, right? Was that Dice K? And a lot of people are like, it's kind of just the screwball, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at something like the ghost forkball, and it's a weird grip, and that ball, when it is working right, it just dies. So is there just something you could say about being able to throw a pitch with that kind of movement? Again, not knowing a ton about Kodai Senga, but something that, or just to equate it to a regular forkball, and what you can tell us about that.
Well, it's going to be an adjustment for the hitters who face him because it's probably a little bit different movement than they've seen. But look, the key for any pitcher and any new guy in the big leagues is going to be adjusting to what he sees in the strike zone, how he faces guys, getting to know scouting reports in that league, and everything that goes along with it. So there's always an adjustment there when you switch teams and come to a new place. He's coming to a whole new league. So he's going to see And that's usually advantage pitcher early on because none of the hitters have seen you yet.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to watch some video on you and everything, but they've never seen what you look like in the box. So until he goes out and makes multiple starts and they start to get some more video and scouting reports on him live in the big leagues, I think advantage has got to be to him.
Yeah. Before we head into the break, and for everybody watching live, maybe for the first time, the break's just about 10 seconds, just something we need for the audio version of this show for a little ad block. But if you're watching live, it'll be super quick. Of course, John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez talking with former Mets pitcher Glendon Rusch. Glendon, thanks so much for being here once again. We appreciate it. I do want to ask you about, I'll give you the final thought on this, just the way the saga unfolded with Carlos Correa and the Mets. Again, I don't know if you followed it with bated breath the way all of us diehard Met fans did, where every day we're just refreshing Twitter, hoping that he would sign. But, I could say, and Ibby could say, as lifelong baseball fans, never quite have seen a free agency saga like that. No. So, you lived it on the other side. You were a player. You've been a free agent. Have you ever seen, heard of, known about anybody who went through something like that? Because it was wild, man.
No, nothing like that. That was as wild as I've ever seen. I think the funny part was I kept going and talking to my kids. I'm like, oh, they're going to get it done. They're going to get it done. When the Mets came in and Steve Cohen and the Mets front office came in and said, okay, he's our guy. We're going to snatch him. I thought that it would eventually get done. They would work out some sort of language in the contract, but they were obviously scared off enough that they didn't feel the risk, or they felt the risk outweighed the reward by a long shot, in my opinion, to back out of that deal and go elsewhere. But fortunately, they had enough backup. It's not like they were constructing a roster around him. They were just making him another piece of a big championship caliber roster. So I think that it's good to see. Look, everyone loves what Steve Cohen does. Everyone loves his interaction with the fan base and how much pride he takes in the product he's putting on the field. So I think it's also good to see that, they're doing their due diligence and making sure that they don't get burned on something like that too. Would everyone love to have Carlos Correa? Of course. Yeah. Right. Course. On your roster, but it wasn't for the best. And I think in the long run, they've got some guys coming too, right? That they can in the like prospect pipeline. So yeah.
Got him. Yeah.
I totally agree. All right. So that said, we're about 30 minutes in. Gonna head into the break. Like I said, quick 10-second ad spot for the audio version of this show. The live show will be right back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, our guest this week, the one and only Glendon Rusch. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part. Our guest this week, joining us live on YouTube, live on Twitter, is Glendon Rusch. And of course, watching us live on YouTube is the best way to interact with the show because your comments, your questions, your concerns, just saying hello to Glendon, all of that stuff come in real time. Even if you want to just throw up a couple ghost icons, we were talking about Kodai Senga and the ghost forkball, you can do that too. We see them in real time. We can interact with them, but we understand that not everybody can do that all the time. Don't worry. This episode will live on our YouTube channel as soon as we're done recording live. The YouTube channel is appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. That's where you can find us. Turn on notifications, subscribe, and of course, hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying what you see right now. And if you can't do any of that, you can still listen to the audio version of this show, which comes out tomorrow morning on your way to school, on your way to work, while you're at the gym. Anything like that, the world is your oyster. And of course, we are talking with Glendon Rusch. Glendon, I do want to ask you, we touched on it for a quick second. We talked about the 3-batter minimum. The other thing that's out right now with Major League Baseball is this enormous list of rule changes. The size of the base, the limited shifts, the limited pickoffs, the pitch clock, position players pitching, the ghost runner now becoming permanent. There's a lot to digest there. I think most baseball purists hate all of them. Ibby and I don't necessarily hate all of them to that same burning degree, but what's your thoughts overall on that list of rule changes? And is there one in particular that you don't like and one that you would say, that one's fine for me?
I actually like that they made a rule on the position players pitching because I think that got out of hand last year, especially. I'm fine with the shift idea. I think going back to what we've seen, it does take a lot away from left-handed hitters, especially some power guys that are yanking line drives into short right field, and they're being caught and thrown out at first.
Shortened them.
Yeah, would I have shifted more probably when I was playing? Had three guys on one side of the field, maybe. I don't. We didn't do it as much back then as they did in the recent years. The bases, I don't know how much that's going to change much. I don't know. The pickoffs, I don't really understand that one that much.
It's a tough one.
I know they're encouraging guys to run more, right? They're saying, okay, if you pick off twice, you can't throw over again, and if you don't pick the guy off the third time, it's a balk, right? Yeah. And he advances, or he's got free reign to steal. But I don't know. Teams don't run and don't hit and run that much anyways, because from a statistical standpoint and analytics standpoint, they're being told don't give away those outs ever because they want more plate appearances. So I don't know how much that one's going to change. Pitch clock, that's a whole nother, that's out of my realm, because I would have never had a problem with that, because I worked as quick as you could go.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think that covers everything, right?
Pretty much. How do you feel about the extra inning rule, the ghost runner on second base in extras?
I wish they would amend that to play maybe a 10th and an 11th straight up, or something in there, right? Where it's because you're still going to burn those relief pitchers regardless. I understand they're trying to keep it down to where you don't throw 16 innings or 17 and guys are getting shipped in and out to get fresh arms. I get that point of it, but maybe play the 10th and the 11th straight up or something like that. And then if it's still tied, then switch to the runner on second. I don't know.
I got one, because I'm still trying to understand, because we didn't cover this last time, John. When it comes to that pickoff move, you have two chances on a throw over, right? So it's, if you throw over twice and the runner is safe both times, does that just give the runner then free reign to take the biggest lead that he wants to then go, or they can throw over a third time? But you're saying they can't throw over a third time.
You can throw over a third time, but you have to record an out somewhere. So in other words, you don't have to pick the guy off, but if you threw over, so let's say you're a lefty like Glendon, and you can look right at the guy. Yeah. You can just step off and throw. If he takes that enormous lead, you don't have to pick him off in the traditional sense. You can throw to the first baseman, the guy breaks for second, first baseman throws down to the shortstop, you tag him out. Everything's all good. It's basically a live ball from that point on. But the crazy part is you can't even step off if you've thrown over twice. It's any disengagement from the rubber, which is what I find crazy about the rules.
Yeah. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, as far as, after those two times over, it's like, okay, he can get as big a lead as he wants, but you still have the ability to pick him off, so he can't get too big a lead, because then he's dead anyways. I understand that. Well, I guess we'll have to see how it works, really.
Yeah.
And you know what? Once it gets going in the regular season, maybe it's not nearly as bad as we all think it's going to be. I don't know.
That's how I felt. I mean, a lot of people agreeing with you in the comments, either now or going back a couple weeks ago when we talked about some of the rules. Carlos Ramos saying, thank you. Give at least 2 innings of real Babes ball. I think he means baseball, before you make a joke out of it. And then Stevie Mack saying, play a normal inning for the 10th, but the juiced balls are being used. That's actually a pretty good idea. No, I think I'm with you on a lot of it. I'm with you on the sense that I thought when they rolled out the ghost runner, I was like, this is slow pitch softball. This is not baseball. It doesn't make sense. I don't like it. I think it's ridiculous. I was so up in arms against it. And then I watched it and I was like, it's actually kind of exciting, and it introduces a new level of strategy that you didn't see before. You see a lot of guys walk the first batter up to set up the double play. Sometimes they'll hit a 3-run home run that really puts you behind the 8 ball. Sometimes they hit right into that double play, or you eliminate the runner at third on the next pitch. So there's a lot of different ways to go. So I feel like maybe, and the pickoff rule is my least favorite one, but I feel like maybe you're onto something, Glendon, where like, I don't know. Maybe we'll watch it and we'll go, actually, this is kind of neat. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we know how much it's going to come into play. I still, guys that can't run aren't going to run anyways, right? Does it encourage the guys that are 20, 30, 40 stolen base type guys to run even more? Maybe, but I don't know if it's going to be a huge difference. We'll have to see.
Carlos Ramos saying, "Don't worry, I'll say it for you, Glendon. That pickoff rule is BS." And going back a little bit when we were talking about the pitch speed that Glendon can top out at nowadays, Ibby, you said something that hurt one of our viewers' feelings. You said, "Not bad at your age," and she said, "At your age,
Well,
he's my age."
Steph, I mean, come on. I'm talking about something. Throwing a baseball is not easy. You know, throwing a baseball that hard is not easy as you get older. That's all. The fact that you can still do that is awesome. It really is.
Yeah, a lot more preparation and a lot more recovery it takes to do it. Yeah.
Glendon, the other thing me and Ibby talked about a lot the last couple of weeks, but specifically last week, because it's going to start soon, is something that you never had to deal with in your playing career, which is the World Baseball Classic. So do you like it? Would you have wished that it was a thing you could have played in when your playing career was going? Like, what are your thoughts on the WBC?
Yeah, I actually love it, and I think it's gotten better and better and better over the years as they've done it, because they've kind of refined it, and you've also seen it gain traction to where it's like basically every superstar wants to play for the most part. So it reminds me a little bit of, you know, back in the late 90s when I went to winter ball in Puerto Rico. It's like all the superstars that were from Puerto Rico were playing in the Winter League. You know, Juan Gonzalez, Pudge Rodriguez, Roberto Alomar, Carlos Delgado, all those guys were playing, and it's a pride thing, and guys love being a part of it. The one thing I always wanted to do when I was playing was go on that Japan tour, you know, where they would, like, every other year they would take a USA type team over to Japan and play a kind of a tour for 4 or 5 games or whatever. I never was able to do it. I got to go to Japan with the Mets the year we opened the season there in 2000. So that was pretty neat. I got to make a start there, but yeah, I think the World Baseball Classic is awesome. And I think they're just continuing to improve it. And I think the fans give you the feedback. And I think for the most part, people really enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. We both agreed. Our guest last week, Ant Rivera, who's got another great Mets podcast called Subway to Shea, he also agreed. The big sentiment from a lot of people was, I just wish it was at the end of the season rather than when guys were trying to ramp up for the season. So I do want to ask you again, as somebody who lived that, because I certainly haven't, Ibby hasn't, a lot of the people in our comments, you know, nobody's played professional baseball. You have. So do you think it would work better in, let's say, November, or do you like where it is? And how would you prepare differently if you were going to pitch in the WBC versus a normal spring training?
I don't think you would get the excitement and the traction from the players themselves to do it at the end of the season, because when they're done, you know, with everything they did prepping into spring training, then a full season, and then anyone that played in the playoffs or the World Series, I think it might be tough to do it then. I think this is the best possible time. It is. The only thing you miss out on is the big top end starters being fully revved up, and starting pitchers, that is.
Yeah.
And it's like where they're going to go 5-6 innings, and then you're going to see guys go a couple innings and then mix match bullpen a bunch of nasty arms after that. So, but you know what I do like though is that you see the minute this year's teams started to get put together, it was just one guy after another. Like, oh yeah, Mike Trout's going to play. Oh, Clayton Kershaw wants in. And I know he's out now, but you know, Nestor Cortez is in. Like, you see all these great guys that are fun to watch, and they all want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and there's the notable list that we had last week, Ibby, as well, of, you know, the Mets players. You know, again, Glendon, everybody always looks at the starting pitchers, and with good reason, because like you said, guys aren't 100% ramped up. And the only one on this list for the Mets that's scheduled to, you know, contribute in a major way is Jose Quintana. He's in the Mets rotation, going to be their 4th or 5th starter, depending. Other than that, guys like Kodai Senga is like, look, I'm not going to pitch for Japan. I'm coming over to a new league. Scherzer and Verlander obviously don't have anything to prove. They don't need to go to the WBC at this point in their careers. But when you look at the offensive side, or anybody else there, from, you know, guys who are a bit older like Ottavino to somebody like Diaz, who obviously is such an important part of the Mets bullpen. Then you look at, you know, Alonso and Lindor played 160 games last year. Do you look at any of those guys, or do you have concern, I guess, for any of the Mets players on this list? And
no.
guys can get hurt anytime. We understand that.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, even if you look at Ottavino or Diaz or any of those guys, realistically, I mean, how many innings are they going to throw in the WBC? 5, right? Or
Probably.
something like that. Like Pete's going to get some at bats, McNeil, Lindor. I don't really have any concerns. I think it's great. I also think it steps up their level of competition right away, because I think we all go through the same. Everyone goes through the same excitement in spring training. You get there, it's pitchers and catchers. Then it's the full squad. Then it's, all right, here we go. We start games. And then after about 5 to 7 days of games, you go, all right, when's the season start? It's like, wait, we got 21 more spring training games. Let's get the season going. So I think for these guys, they'll get the juices flowing a little earlier. And look, everyone expects the Mets to be a division winner and compete for a World Series this year. So I think the more competition those guys get in early is great too. I think they obviously want to be a part of it, and they're excited for it.
I think so too. And as fans, Ibby and I talked about this last week. Ibby, like, it's you get to watch real baseball. It's great to get Glendon's perspective of like, yeah, you get like 5 or 6 games in and then you're ready to go. You want to start the season. I think fans feel the same way. It's like everybody's going to be so jacked up for the Mets' first intra-squad game of the spring. Yeah. And then after like 4 days, you're like, okay.
All right. Can we get going now?
Yeah. I don't want to watch number 87.
Right. That's what I was saying. That's exactly what I said last week, where it was like, we get to a point where it's like, do you want to be sitting there on your couch in the middle of the day watching guys in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s in terms of their numbers on their jerseys? You don't some of the guys. Sure, there's some prospects that we want to see how they're coming along, how they face major leaguers, all that stuff. But at the same time, you want to watch exciting baseball. And yes, I would much look, I love my Mets. We love our Mets, but I would much rather watch, if you're telling me Team Puerto Rico with a bunch of superstars is facing the Dominican Republic in Miami and the place is on fire, I want to watch that because that is legit baseball with some juice that I actually want to see, and it's exciting. That's what we want. So like when you're like what you were saying before, Glenn, like these guys are pumped up and they want to be there, whether it's the Trouts or the Alonsos. And when you heard, I think it was a couple days ago, Lindor came out. And he was basically saying how excited you could just tell when someone's talking about it. Lindor takes so much pride saying how I'm going to put on that jersey and it says Team Puerto Rico across the chest. And like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to bust my ass. I'm going to do my best for my country. Like hearing that stuff is just, it's awesome to see. And they're going to go out there. Yes, as fans, we have that worry that they might get hurt or whatever, but the same thing can happen in the spring. It could be something even less happening in the spring and they might tweak something or whatever. But it's a pride thing. I don't think fans are ever really going to truly understand a player's motivations for this, but it's clearly a pride thing. They go out there, they have some fun. And for us as fans to watch it, it's much better baseball than watching, again, those 6 to 20 something plus games in the spring of just going through the motions.
Agreed. I was with when I was with the Padres my last year, my manager was Edwin Rodriguez, who managed Team Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. I guess that was the last one. How many years out are we? 6?
I think it was 6 because wasn't it supposed to be in 2020?
It was supposed to be, yeah. And then it got pushed, yeah.
So and I talked to him about it, and he said he just said the experience was incredible, and he was a big league manager with the Marlins and been around forever as a coach, but there's a level of pride that these guys take with this, and that's kind of why I went to the comparison of winter ball, because it's just. They want to compete. They want to win. It doesn't matter who's on their roster, who they're playing against. That's what it's all about. It's fun to watch. And spring training is, after the excitement wears off, then like you guys were saying, it's you start having your starter goes 3, and the next thing you know, you're seeing your closer in the 4th inning, and then you're seeing younger guys come up and get their feet wet, and there's a shift change and all that stuff. So those games can wear on you pretty quick.
Yeah, I remember talking to Todd Frazier at the Queens Baseball Convention, and Todd's had a lot of accolades in his career, and he's won the Home Run Derby, and of course the Little League World Series when he's a kid, and so much in his illustrious career. And we got to the discussion about the silver medal in the Olympics that he was able to play in because he wasn't an active major leaguer at the time, and he was like, winning the silver medal is the biggest thing I've ever done in my life. Forget about my baseball career. And this is a guy whose baseball career, Glendon, started in terms of the spotlight when he was like 12 years old, and he played in the bigs for, over a decade. So I think there's a little bit of the similarities there. Again, you're not going to get a gold medal or a silver medal at the WBC, but you see the pride of people wanting to play and wanting to play for their country and wanting to put the sport of baseball on display where, quite frankly, it belongs, I think.
Yep. No, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Before we let you get out of here, and you've given us so much time, I do want to ask you a couple questions. People had a few questions coming in, so if you don't mind giving us a few more minutes here. JJC saying, do you collect your own baseball cards, Glendon? We see behind you this time and the last time we talked, obviously you've got some framed jerseys, but do you collect cards?
I do. I still collect, and I'm in the process of, it's been going on for quite a while. I've collected all mine over the years. And then over the last few years, I've started going on the hunt for anything that was rare, that was numbered or parallels of certain cards and stuff like that. And I'll tell you guys a funny story. The hardest card for me to ever find was when Topps did that Subway Series World Series set. And each set came with a full set of Yankees, full set of Mets, and then it came with one special card in there called a Subway token card. And I could never find mine. So you'd only get one out of the whole set, one player, either team. And I could never find mine. And eventually I found this guy on eBay that had collected the whole set. But he wanted an astronomical amount of money for it. And so I sent him a message and I said, hey, here's the deal. I'm trying to get this. I'm collecting all my cards so I can have them later in life for my kids and everything else. And he sends me a message back and saying, you're never going to believe this, but I have 2 of yours. And so he's like, it's yours. Send me your address. And this guy, this really nice guy I met on eBay, sent it to me. And so I sent it this year to SGC and had it put in a, in a slab, got it graded and put it in a slab. And so, I collect them. I love it. It's a lot of fun. I love opening cards and still love doing it.
That's awesome. I thought for a second, I thought you were going to have a Turk Wendell watch box full of money and meet this guy.
Hey, that's how much money he wanted.
I don't know if this is I hesitated to pull this question up, but I think it's fair. And again, if it's something you don't want to answer, we're live, you don't have to. But I don't know if there is a relationship that you have with Jeff Cohen asks about your relationship with current Mets pitcher Joey Lucchesi. Joey Fuego obviously came up, spent some time in the Padres minor leagues. So do you have a relationship with him to this day?
Joey is my guy.
Okay.
I love Joey. Love Fuego. I talk to him on a pretty regular basis. I checked in with him not too long ago, maybe like a week ago.
Okay.
I had him for a half season in Lake Elsinore when we had him with the Padres. He pitched great. Love the kid. Nicest kid in the world. Super hard worker. I'm excited to see him back. I actually think he will be a great asset this year, depending on, whether they need a spot starter. Maybe he gives them longer innings out of the pen. But I'm so happy that he's back and healthy and recovered. And yes, I love Fuego. Talk to him all the time. And the churve, baby.
That's the churve, baby.
He's great. He's great, man. He's such a good kid, and he's going to be a fun for the fans to enjoy now that he's back healthy.
I think so too. I'm looking forward to seeing him back. 100%. And I'll bring up this notable Mets offseason moves. And right there towards the bottom is Trevor Williams. And a lot of people think that that's maybe the role that Joey Lucchesi can fill, that spot starter, or come in, if your starter doesn't have it, and give you that kind of old school long man. Do you think he has the do you think he has what it takes to fill that role? Because a lot of people say that's like maybe the most difficult role for a pitcher, is to not know what your role actually is.
Yeah, that is difficult. I think he can absolutely do it. And the benefit of him obviously is the ability to get lefties and righties out. He's real tough on lefties, but he might even be tougher on righties. I don't know what his splits were over the last couple of years when he was healthy, but he can do it. No doubt about it. It'll take some learning for him, because he's definitely a routine guy and he's used to starting and everything, but I think he could fill that void. And look, every championship team usually needs 7 or 8 starters, right? By the time the season's over. I can only think back to maybe like our 2000 team where I think we had all 5 guys make most all their starts.
Right.
But, you know, you still have a fill in here and there, but that's just the way the game works. And guys get hurt, guys have a dead arm or need a break, and you need somebody like that. So
especially with an older staff.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Especially with
you know
staff.
what? It might be better for a guy like Joey because he's coming off of the injury, and you know he's not going to be able. If he was going to be counted on to be a starter all season, you know he's not going to be able to give you the 30, 35 starts anyway. So this is a good way to kind of ease back in. The last thing I'll ask you, Glendon, and again, this is on the spot, but last time it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. So I got to ask you, do you have another Turk Wendell story?
Oh my gosh.
Come on, you got
That's
something?
my good go-to Turk story.
For everybody who's watching this live, we had Glendon on last time. I think it was like a week or two or whatever after Turk Wendell, and he gave us this brilliant story about Turk. And I know that's your go-to. And you know what? I'm sure some people haven't seen it. So if that's the one you want to retell, I would appreciate it if you did it because we're live, we're on video now. So I just
Okay. We got to go to the go-to. Yeah. So Turk, he was a watch collector at the time when I was with him, but he also was one of the most popular Mets by far for doing appearances. So he was constantly doing appearances, card signings, all kinds of stuff. And every single dollar that he got from those appearances, which was a lot at the time, he would sock it away, and he carried this little briefcase around, and the top of the briefcase was full of all these beautiful watches, and underneath the watches was a stack like this of cash, right? So I called him. Turk was my traveling ATM. So anytime I needed money, I was like, "Hey, Turk, can I borrow $300?" And he just pull open that case, and there it was. And he was ready to go. And I always paid him back, so don't ever let him tell you I didn't pay him back. Yeah, he's one of the best, man. I love Turk. I got to see him at Old Timers Day. Unfortunately, I missed him because he does a bunch of hunting, like tour guides. He's a tour guide for hunting. So I missed him at fantasy camp this year. I did Mets fantasy camp this year for the first time, and he's a staple there. He's there all the time. Yeah. And unfortunately, he couldn't be there this year, so I missed him.
You know, it's one of those things, like, I think in theory, Ibby, I would love to do is like have Turk Wendell be my hunting guide, but like also I don't think I could do it. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like in theory, but like
I don't think I could either.
I don't think I could hack it, Glendon. Like we talked to him about like the story where he like disappeared in the woods for like 15 hours, and people didn't know if he was dead or alive. And he was like, oh, yeah, I was just tracking a cougar. It was no big deal. And like we put him on the spot with the story, and he's like, oh, it's not even that exciting of a story. It's like sometimes you go off, you don't get cell service, you know, you're tracking an animal, and that's just how it goes. I'm like, I don't think that's
like what?
Yeah, he's one of a kind. He's a mold breaker for sure. He's awesome.
He is great. Glendon, thank you so much for giving us an
Glendon.
hour of your time. Really appreciate it. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to mention? Any experience you've had over, you know, whether it was a fantasy camp, Old Timers Day, anything you're working on, you want to plug, anything at all that you want to mention right now?
I'll share with you guys a little bit later. I have a really cool project I'm working on that's been going on for a year plus. I'll tell you guys off the air. I don't want to put it out yet. Okay. You guys will love it. Yeah, it's coming. It's right up your alley. The second thing I wanted to mention actually earlier, I'm glad you asked me, because yesterday I spent a bunch of time listening to the interview that Bill Pulsifer did with Jay Horowitz. I don't know if you guys have heard that yet. I think it's out on Mets YouTube maybe. Yep. But for all you Mets fans out there, listen to that interview. It's awesome. I got to reconnect with Pulse at fantasy camp this year. We had kind of been in contact here and there over Twitter, and you know, I was with him in spring training with the Mets in 2000. Awesome guy, wonderful guy, but he really opens up about mental health and his struggles that he had when he was pitching and everything else that goes along with it. And it was just a great interview. So, and I know Mets fans will love it. So if you get an opportunity, check that out.
Yeah, I saw it this morning.
I saw some of the clips. Yeah.
I saw the clip this morning. I haven't had a chance to listen or watch, but obviously, like, Jay, who's been on this show with us, is so he's a staple in Mets lore and Mets fandom, but he's also so gracious and so honest. And, we had him on, and, he was like, hey, this is what I would have done differently with Doc and Darryl. And this is where I feel like, I, even with that knowledge of what I would have done differently, how I feel like I let Matt Harvey down and all this stuff. And so I'm really interested to see Jay's perspective in talking to Bill about it, and just, from both sides, from the media perspective and from the guy who lived it as the player, trying to live up to all these expectations and everything. So that is great. Yeah, Met fans should absolutely check it out.
Yeah, it's great. Jay does a good job, and what you brought up is part of it in there. Of he was saying, if he looks back, on some of his decisions he made with players and how he handled the media with players and everything else, that sometimes he maybe should have said no more than he said yes. And it's a hard balance, and the New York media market is not easy. And those guys were right in the middle of tons and tons of hype, right? With Doc and Darryl, and then came along Pulsifer, Izzy, and Paul Wilson, and that next generation.
Generation K, yeah.
So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, check out the interview. You guys will love it.
Ibby, you have anything else for Glendon before we get out of here?
The only thing I wanted to bring up is just bringing it back to Old Timers Day. Like, you're there, you're seeing all the guys and everything, and we talked about it with other players that have been on the show, just the appreciation. And I talked about it when we broke down Old Timers Day, just the appreciation that Steve Cohen has really put into the history and, what the Mets were. Like, a lot of times everyone just assumes, Mets joke, not a lot of history, but there's been a lot of history for this team. A lot of great players have come through, whether it was for their full careers, parts of their careers, end of their careers, whatever it may be. But just from your perspective, being a guy that was on a big team for us, and just thinking back on the Mets history in general, for you, what was it like just experiencing that type of love that was finally shown to all players of the history for this team?
It was amazing, because I think that what you forget sometimes as I'm a player that was part of a roster. I was never a superstar, was never a Cy Young Award winner, but the Mets fan base, and I'll say the same thing about the Cubs fan base, because I was a Cub too. Mm-hmm. They appreciate you, and they really like interacting with you. And if you treat them, with respect, and they get you, you get them, and it's a back and forth thing. The fans are the best down the road. I mean, the Mets fans treat me so well now when I go back there and I'm a part of an event or anything else that goes along with it. It's fun, and it's humbling, and it's exciting. And look, we all love to put the uniform back on, because once you take it off, it's I don't know, it's probably one of the hardest things you ever do. And being a part of a team, and being a big leaguer, and figuring out what you actually mean to fans and a fan base, and people come up to you and say, man, you were my favorite guy when I was 14 or whatever, it's really cool. I love being a part of it.
Well, and listen, we love to see that the organization is opening the doors and opening their arms to everyone, and bringing back and righting wrongs. And I don't want to, mention the negative of who was in charge before and all that stuff during your playing career, but it has been different, from the retiring of Willie Mays' number to, making sure that Keith gets all of the accolades that he deserves while he's here. And then, the teams like the 2000 National League Championship Mets, and just anybody else who has come through the door. We're a fervent fan base. We're a fan base that knows baseball, and we love baseball, and we love our Mets. So we appreciate everybody. And Glendon, we especially appreciate you for coming out, doing the show with us. Thank you so much for last time, for this time. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our episode. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, the one and only Glendon Rusch. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. We will see you guys next week. Peace.
Okay.